And then I'm going to actually give our panelists a moment to introduce themselves, and then I'll kind of introduce myself towards the end. So Matt, you're first on my screen. Would you like to start us off? Just tell us who you are and what you teach. And
yeah, I'm Matt Robles. I am an associate professor at San Bernardino Valley College, and I teach geology and oceanography to STEM students. So that's me.
Thank you. Sherry, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Hi, Sherry Lillard, professor of chemistry at San Bernardino Valley College, and I teach chemistry.
Woohoo, love it. Todd, I see you there next.
Hi, hello, and welcome to everybody. And quick thanks to you all for being here. A special thanks to the panelists, and really special thanks to Bethany for organizing this. My name is Todd, and along with my colleagues at San Bernardino Valley College in the science division, particularly I am in the geography and geographic information sciences department. Great to see you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Tatiana, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Bethany. I am Tatiana Vasquez. I am a biology faculty. I'm also the chair of my department. I've taught general biology for majors, for non-majors, some of the A&P courses. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. And I see Jesse is here. He was our lost panelist. We have now found him. I'm so glad he's here. Jesse, do you want to introduce yourself? Wait, you have to unmute first. You have to unmute. Oh,
I'm Jesse Lemieux. I teach chemistry also at San Bernardino Valley College. Good to meet you all.
Thank you. So this is our panel with, we just called it a conversation with STEM faculty. I'm also from San Bernardino Valley College. My name is Bethany Tasaka. I'm part of this coaches group, but I'm also math faculty. And at our campus, math is not in the same division with the rest of the sciences, and I'm so bummed out all the time. I constantly declare myself an honorary member of their division because the science faculty at our college, I think, are doing really, really amazing work when it comes to STEM. I know that a lot of times, or when it comes to equity, I know a lot of times it feels like some of our conversations around equity either don't focus around STEM or even sometimes kind of minimize it, right? Like, oh, you just do these three things. And it's not always practical and applied, which STEM faculty really appreciate that, right? What are actionable things that we can do? So our science division has been meeting, I think for the last year, I don't know, time is weird, right? But with each other, so cross departments to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, and accessibility, and things that are very actionable that they do either in their classes or making recommendations to each other. And that's really what we just want to share out today. So we're here to just hear their voices, hear their stories. And I have a few slides, like I said, I'll kind of go between them just to share with you, you know, what our kind of question prompts are, but I figure you probably want to hear and see from them as well. So I'll switch between them. So a conversation with STEM faculty on equitable practices, learning, and assessment. And our first question, if I can get there. Oh, and here's our panelists again. I probably should have put that up a minute ago. But our first question is, describe a change that you made to your pedagogy to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, and accessibility. What was the result, and would you do anything differently? So I'll leave it up for a moment or two. But I, you know, Matt, would you like to start us off and just share, you know, what's a change that you made?
Yeah, so last semester, our STEM science division really focused on a few different courses in looking at how DEIA work could impact those courses, and geography was one of them. And it was great because it allowed me to look at my classes kind of within that context and see what I could do differently to kind of expand on some of these ideas. And so just a couple of things that I've done is, historically, geology has been a science that's kind of stuck to the basics and not really dove into some of these larger kind of concepts. And so it allowed me to look more purposefully at what I'm doing. And so what I've tried to do is include more emphasis on those individuals that have helped kind of bring our science to where it is today. and specifically those geologists that aren't highlighted normally, or they weren't highlighted when I was in school. So minorities, women in the geosciences. And so taking opportunities to find geologists of color, find women geologists that are making an impact in the field and highlight them throughout the course. And I think what it's done is but have students get more kind of engaged in the subject matter. I think prior to this, you'd go over the basics and students would pay attention, but now they seem to kind of perk up a little bit more. And I guess they're starting to maybe see themselves, it's kind of anecdotal, but they're starting to see themselves in the subject that they're learning about throughout the semester. And so I need to keep doing that and do that more intently and kind of just keep improving on these and finding more and more geoscientists like that to highlight. And so it's been fun for me and a learning opportunity for me. And so I'm just happy to be doing it.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really helpful. And it's I don't want to use the word simple, right? But it's a small thing that we can do to just make students, feel more visible. We have a question in the chat asking if geology science can include urban landscapes.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why not. I mean, so I guess specifically, I haven't looked at that in my classes. I'm sure Dr. Heibel has and can probably speak a little bit more to that as it probably addresses GIS and geography more specifically. But one thing, I guess, kind of tangentially to that is when I talk about natural disasters, I'm much more dedicated to talking about the impact that natural disasters like earthquakes and climate change and sea level rise and all these things that are occurring, how those impact socioeconomically low areas and marginalized groups more so than other groups. And so that's kind of one thing I've thrown in there that is kind of linked to that. But Dr. Heibel might be able to speak more to the urban landscape in geography and GIS.
Yeah, please jump in, Todd.
Oh no, and thank you for that. And one thing that I really like what Matt was saying earlier, Professor Robles, was that interdisciplinary approach. And we're certainly not doing this in a vacuum. Something that Bethany mentioned earlier about mathematics. I mean, it really does take all of us, that quote unquote village approach is so important. So in our geography class, we're not just kind of staying in our lane, so to speak. We're incorporating the earth sciences, the life sciences, biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics, of course. And yes, absolutely. So one thing that made me think of, Matt, and maybe this is not where you're going. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but students as active citizen scientists. So let's say a student is taking in a geography class or whatever class they're taking. Maybe it's an online class, or maybe not. Maybe it's a face-to-face class. Let's say that student has limited mobility. Maybe they don't have a car. Maybe they rely on the bus. Maybe they have some mobility challenges. So yeah, how can they see and do science like geoscience where they live? And that's one thing that I'm still trying to get my head around, but absolutely, looking at maps, even using, most of our students have a phone, right? Not all, but most students have a mobile phone. There are really cool apps out there. So for example, there's one and Tatiana, Professor Tatiana, I'm probably treading into your turf here. There are really neat plant identification apps that students can download for free on their phones and identify maybe some of the plants in their neighborhood on campus. So we don't have to engage in any sort of grandiose travel that might be impossible for students, but students can see how they can contribute to whatever our STEM major, science, field, career. Again, I like what Matt said earlier, students seeing themselves as active agents. So that's just one example. And so thank you.
I have to unmute first. Thanks, Todd. How about you, Sherry? Could you describe a change you made to your pedagogy to promote the DEI/AA work? What was the result, and would you do anything differently?
So one thing I did is change my attitude, and I'll give a specific example in a little bit. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that access to science for so many decades really was impeded by elitism, that only a select few were allowed to, that were worthy of pursuing scientific fields. And the problem is that because of these attitudes, courses are often traditionally run with a punitive mindset. And that excludes a lot of people that may be fully capable of learning and excelling in science, but that because of the way those courses are run, are just cut out of the loop. And I think we need to be very careful about equating rigor with rigidity, because I often hear, oh, we're going to water it down if we introduce some flexibility. And that's not what I'm talking about. Of course, we have the rigor, we have our standards.
Oh no, we lost you a little bit, Cherry. That's okay. I know you said you were having some technical issues, but I saw a lot of heads nod when you said that. I'll come back to you. Tatiana, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, of course. I think that, she really touches on what we've been talking about, but Sherry's back, so go for it,
Am I
Sherry.
back?
Please, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I've been having some internet issues.
You were on a roll, and then
I was,
out.
but if we can, so we don't water down the content, but if we can just introduce some flexibility, then I think that really does promote equity and inclusion. So the change that I've made in my chemistry courses is to permit students to resubmit lab reports. That was something that I was absolutely opposed to years and years and years ago, but it's something that I do for all of my classes now. And so I set everything up on Canvas, even though my labs are face-to-face. So there's an assignment, there's the rubric. I help them during the lab. So one of the requirements is that I check off their work as they go along. So that allows me to have recurring conversations with each individual student about the work that they're doing. And I can check it off as they go along. Then when I grade the lab reports, I can put comments into Canvas that says, oh, calculation error or significant figures or whatever it is, and then let them resubmit those. So they're not lost points. They can resubmit the lab reports and earn back points because maybe they just misunderstood a calculation, or maybe, I don't know, stuff happens, right? And I don't feel that it's just being that punitive for some of those things is the right way to go. And the result is that that it really has increased the communication with the students, both in lab and just kind of this process of allowing these conversations about their work. And I think they really are starting to see that it sets up a student-centered environment instead of, okay, well, here's your lab. Okay, try to do it, and then start checking off some points. It's a much more, I think, inclusive and equitable way to do the labs.
It builds trust too, right? And it lets the student know when, if points are taken off, okay, she's not just out to get me, right? That there's reason behind it, and then they want to work to fix it. There's a change. It shifts that whole perspective on it. Yeah. Tatiana, did you want to share?
Yeah, I wanted to. Yeah, definitely. All of what my colleagues have said, and we've worked together. And so I do want to express that it is an attitude change, but it also takes that conversation with others to really affirm the attitude change. Because I think that's something that has been brought up before in our meetings, where we're so bound to the practices of our fields in STEM, and going outside of those practices kind of makes us very uncomfortable. And so getting in the uncomfortable spaces is really what we have to practice. And practice being uncomfortable, discussing things that usually may not be part of the textbooks, right? Like, one of the things that, many of the things that I do is actually introducing sociological impacts, as Todd was mentioning. There's impacts that are local. And so I try to infuse content that is per se, like I know in San Bernardino, water and air pollution are a big thing. And so how do I introduce those topics so that the students are aware, they feel empowered? We talk about policies, but remember that I'm a biologist, I'm training biology thinking, right? And so how do we understand the science behind, but at the same time, how do we empower active members, right? So that takes confronting racism, confronting topics that you may be uncomfortable talking. And I have to say this, like I've been practicing, the more I practice, the more I discuss about, like, for example, eugenics and what California has done within eugenics, right? Not just the whole state, not just the world. No, California, we have a lot of issues. There's things that are hidden from us. It has been like removal of populations and also redlining. And there's like topics that are sociological that I have dwell on by bringing in articles to the classroom. So the students' readings have also changed. So I assign readings that are from NPR or, discussions that are outside, from things that I download from other magazines or things like that. So infusing information, then we can have a chance to talk about it. So that also means that I'm cutting back on content. I'm not strictly like we have to, discuss everything at depth. Instead, familiarizing, that's what we are. We're introductory courses. Even if in the majors, right? Like that's the other thing too, that even major students who are going to get into allied health careers is releasing that time for them to connect to each other on topics. And that way I can also hear from them and I can bring in their experiences, right? Obviously they're experiencing racism. They're also experiencing, being underprivileged too. So, or not underprivileged, the underserved is the best word, right? So even, and I even tell my students, I'm very like frank, there's things that I'm still learning to kind of how to figure this out, let's do it together. And so I leave that space within the classroom to have information from them. And then the next semester I'm better because of them. And I love them now too. So they're part of my process of learning too.
Thank you. Jessie, would you like to share? And I can repeat the question for you. Let me scroll up to it. Describe a change you made in your pedagogy to promote DEIAA. What was the result and would you do anything differently? Unmute though, unmute. I did that too.
Okay, my space bar won't unmute me anymore, but it related to this flexibility. One thing that we've been doing is, beginning of the class surveys for a very long time, before all of this DEIA work even began, to understand our students at the beginning of the class. But an opportunity that all of the online changes in the last few years has brought about is that we can survey our students even before they start the class, and we can build our office hours around their schedules. We can make our schedule more flexible and think about it beforehand when we're aware of that half of our students are working 40 hours a week or something like that, which is actually not that uncommon. So also as a chemist, we have fortunately a chemistry body that helps us. I don't know if there are any other chemists in this group here that is watching, but the ACS resources related to the history of chemistry, which has really been whitewashed, right? And white men are all over the chemistry books. And so if you want a little bit better history of chemistry, you kind of have to go outside. And so outside of the textbooks still, unfortunately. Hopefully that will change soon, but we have been making use of those resources that our professional body has given us to give very high quality exposure here for the more diverse history of chemistry. Mathematics. Okay. Yeah. And I'm sure that a lot of that's true in mathematics too, right? A lot of, it wasn't, I'm not an expert on calculus history, but there's a lot of, early math, well, Bethany might be able to speak to this, that did not happen in Europe originally, but if you read the textbooks, you might think that it did. And so trying to find those resources and make use of them, for us, it happened to be easy, but we've been talking about this in our college across disciplines. And I think that has really helped as well, making sure that these discussions happen across the disciplines and between departments and not just within departments. But personally, yeah, that flexibility, I want to latch onto that and the use of the resources that we have been provided by our professional body, and a focus on growth mindset, which it does not relate to, or is not consistent with having very rigid structures, I'd say.
Thanks, Jessie. And I think that, what you're just saying right now ties in directly with what Alpa put into the chat, where, there were post-class surveys and really, they showed that students appreciate that flexibility. So it's good to hear that, others are seeing this as well. Let me share my screen one more time and we'll put the second panel question up, and I will copy and post it in the chat in just a moment. But, one of the themes of our symposium this year really has to do with this learning concept. And we talked a little bit this morning in our opening session, there's ways where we can come into our classroom and just deliver information, right? We can, course objectives, we can read them off, or we can, kind of go through them. But there's also this other aspect of learning. And how do we know, when we're up there, talking, or, maybe your structure is a little different, but, how do we take it from just a course outline of record or something that, we have to teach, we have to cover, into this realm of making sure that our students are actually learning what they're supposed to be learning. And I think that's really relevant in our STEM courses, because so many of them are sequential, right? I know, like I said earlier, I'm in mathematics, and a lot of times our math classes are very much gatekeepers to the other sciences, right? So how do we know that students are walking out of our classrooms having learned something, and beyond just had a bunch of information thrown at them? So I'm going to stop sharing, and I will put this in the chat so you all have it to reference. Should we start with maybe Sherry this time?
Sure. I'm not sure if I'm actually answering the question, but
You're
it's
good.
close. So ever since the pandemic, I have not had a face-to-face lecture. All of my lectures have been online, although my labs did go back face-to-face. So this is the first semester right now. I'm teaching second semester general chemistry with a face-to-face lecture. And so what I've done is maintained all of the Canvas resources that I developed. And when I walk into the classroom, I'm not lecturing. And this is actually took, we're only in our second week, but it took a couple of days to keep reminding the students, nope, I'm not walking in, I'm not clicking through a PowerPoint, I'm not doing any of that. You have all the resources online, all of the web pages that I've built, the videos I've done, and we walk in and we work problems. So each lecture, I walk in with a problem set that they should be able to complete during that hour and 15 minutes, but maybe not, and it doesn't matter. But I walk in and they just start to work. And I let them self-assemble and work with the students they want to work with. And it's a similar approach, as I mentioned, for my labs, where I tell them, let me come by and check your work. And if you have any questions, you ask. And what I love about it is they're all working. And so there's none of those glazed eyes because they're just sitting there at 9:30 in the morning because they're told they have to be there. I mean, they are kind of told they have to be there, but they are working. And, it's a little slow that first day, kind of getting them all up to speed. Like, yeah, this is what we're doing. Second day, students said, are we going to be doing this all the time? And I said, yes, every lecture. I said, it's probably different than what you're used to. But then by the third day, which was a couple days ago, they just know. This is what we do. We walk into class, we get out our calculators, we're going to be handed a sheet. And then I do post the answers to those after the fact. So in terms of grading, they get 2 points. They come to class. I don't really want to call them participation points because they're working. They're earning those points. And so they get 2 points each lecture period. And then after the lecture period, I post the key online. So that way, if they didn't have a chance to work through everything, then they can consult the key. And how do I know they're learning? It's not quantifiable at that stage, but I know they're doing the work, right? I'm watching them do the work. I'm answering their questions. We're engaging in conversation. They haven't had an exam yet because we're only in the first week, but I think it helps to have them be much more active than to be passive.
I love it. And we have some conversation in the chat about flipped classrooms. And I think that's very connected to what you're doing, right? Even if we maybe don't call it that, it's kind of broadly defining it. Matt, would you like to share with us?
Yeah, so it's I don't know, I guess it's somewhat difficult, especially now with the online classes, to quantify learning. So I'll kind of stick to the on-campus physical classes. One of the things that I've done is I've moved away from being so reliant on what they're telling me in an exam or what they're being able to write down in a written test. So last semester I had a student that was having a difficult time expressing her thoughts on particular geo-specific topics. And she came up to me after class and she's like, I get home and I can't write it down. I know what I want to say, but I can't write it down. And I said, well, talk to me, right? Let's chat about it. And she had time after class. And so we sat down and she was able to tell me in her own words what she wanted to say when she got home to write that. And so being a little bit more lenient in the way that I'm accepting the answers that are given to me, kind of like she wrote them on paper and she didn't do very well, but when she explained it to me, she explained it much better. And so taking that information and adjusting her scores related to what she knows, obviously, because I saw her, speaking it and pulling it out of her brain and telling me, just being more flexible in the way that I'm accepting answers to be produced is one way that has allowed me to assess learning from a variety of students in a variety of different ways.
Thank you. Tatiana, would you like to share?
Yeah, sure. I think that I do multiple different things. So definitely like from what Matt was saying, like creating non-traditional assessments, right? So something that steps out of the traditional, quizzes or exams. And so kind of projects that are throughout the semester, but also not a big project at the end only, but you ask them to do like multiple things over the semester. And then the amount of points, so I take that growth mindset perspective. So it starts with low points, but a lot of feedback, right? So lots of feedback and smaller chunks. So you really chunk the material that they need to be submitting in terms of a project. And so for me, as an example of that would be like, let's say a lab report. In biology, we write a lot of lab reports. And so instead of them submitting a full lab report, I say like, let's just focus on this one part of the lab report. And you're going to submit it and you can I'm going to give you feedback on that. So how many points? It's low points. And then I actually don't give them the points until they give me the second submission, because that way they're not concentrated on the point system too, because obviously, I think that's the system that we were, that's what education does, right? We're point system driven. So that also, I'm kind of creating worksheets that instead of saying you need to write a report, let's kind of break it apart. So what's part of this worksheet so that at the end you can really create your lab report and you didn't even notice it, right? So it's things that you do that. And then I've also have inserted reflection questions where they can reflect on their own learning. So, so what do you think about this particular exercise? What did you learn? Like, how do you think that in your everyday experience? Like, give me an example that kind of relates to your everyday. And so when I started, I have to say, like, I didn't know what I was going for until they started giving me feedback. So I have to be honest, like, it's like, okay, I don't know what to expect. So give me something. And then from there, I would start kind of figuring out, okay, this is how I want to outline it better for them. But reflections really are so important, because they really give you a window into how they're thinking and how they see nature. And once I know how they see nature, I can understand how to coach them to see nature in the biology mindset, if you will. And so that helps tremendously, because sometimes, as we are experts in our field and we already have the curse of knowledge, I let them know, I don't know what I don't know, because I already know this stuff, right? So it's good to ask them, questions that actually let me be in their shoes and be aware of that. So, yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you want to share about that project we were talking about? I think it'd be a really cool thing to share out.
So in my non-majors course and also in my majors, I'm going to try to implement this. So we talk about urban landscapes. We talk about plants, plant diversity in our local neighborhood as well, and for our area. And then I also introduced the notion that a lot of that vegetation, the names of the vegetation was given by like Spanish names or, colonization essentially. So I addressed colonization, and then I introduced ideas of local indigenous populations, of how they have implemented that. And they do exercises first, like how to find those populations that live in our local area. And so they have to go to a map and find their address, like where they live and what populations that are native indigenous populations of California, where they lived and what they used, the particular plants. So then they have to walk through like what particular plants were used, how are they important for biological ecosystems, but also how they're important for human populations, and the other part of it is that I also created a part of maybe introducing the idea of their cultures and identities. So one example is asking them, are there plants that you use in your cultures? And when I talk about cultures, I also introduce what that actually means. It's not just the ethnicity. It means like your traditions in your family, the traditions of, because we have different traditions also, right? Like we have different identities. So I talk about different identity with your friends. And so how plants get used to bring people together, or like whatever it is that, that they feel that it's important. And so they bring those out. And one example that, I shared with Bethany is that I had a student from Tonga, and she really just was so happy that, I opened this door, and, most of the students, they really wanted to talk about, traditional things that their grandparents, had passed on, activities that they were doing themselves. And so she talked about coconuts, but she really taught me a lot of stuff about how the relevance of coconut oil, and how her church was actually really in this production of coconut oil, and what it brought up youth together. So it was right interesting. And so what I'm thinking about in the next iteration of this is having presentations, right? So they actually could just do a 1 to 2 minute presentation of what they're bringing out, or blogs, or something else that is non-traditional, right? Some other kind of form of assessment that is not just putting it in writing.
Beautiful. Thank you. I know I put you on the spot. Beautiful. I think it's such a cool example. And it shows, sometimes students, given that opportunity, can teach us a lot about who they are. And it expands our horizons even, when it comes to different cultures and different traditions and things like that. I want to be sensitive to time, so I'm going to move to the next question. I didn't get Todd or Jesse in there, but if you want to intertwine questions, I will allow that. So the next one, the last question that we had, and we're open to questions at the end, but is, can you describe a change that you made to your testing practices or your assessment practices, whatever that looks like? What was your reasoning behind making that change, and what result did you see? So let me give Todd the floor, because I didn't give you a moment ago. So please share.
No, thank you, Bethany. Really, thanks to all my fellow panelists. And again, so the great chat that I'm seeing right now, it's like I feel like that squirrel and over the hedge, like, oh my God. And anyway, but it's such exciting stuff. So thank you. And honestly, this is purely self-serving, selfish motives, because I really also wanted to come and learn, because and I guess that's part of what I want to say is maybe kind of a semi-finale, is that just acknowledging to our students, we and this was mentioned before, I'm not saying anything new, but we don't know it all. And also we're going to learn from you all. And I'm really, it's authentic. It comes from a genuine place in my heart and my soul when I tell students, look, I'm probably going to learn more from you all than you're going to learn from me. Yes, I know you're paying whatever it is, $46 a unit. Okay, fine. We're going to learn stuff in this class, some new stuff. But again, just bringing that a priori knowledge, just, making students feel important, seen, heard, kind of riffing on some of what I heard before, some of the changes. So doing away with time limits, allowing multiple attempts so students can really learn. I don't want to use the word mistakes, but maybe try alternate means to answer a particular question. Different modalities and assessments. Yeah, beyond the Canvas test or the pen and paper test, could a student sing a song, write a poem, an interpretive dance? There are all kinds of crazy, really fun, inventive stuff that maybe we in the sciences, STEM, kind of getting out of that rigid model. No, this must be on paper. Thou shalt not do X, Y, and Z. And I think, again, learning from our colleagues in the humanities and social sciences, just behavioral sciences, other ways to, of knowing and being. Last thing I'll say that I personally need to do a better job is not only with outreach to the K through 6, or even K through 12 populations, so important and vital to really encourage that college going process in our communities. We know we all need that in our community colleges. So certainly outreach, but also in-reach. So we have so many wonderful groups on campus with various learning cohorts that I can certainly do a better job of that. So yeah, so thanks. And then I'm looking at Alpa. I'm probably mispronouncing your name. I'm so sorry. SpongeBob. That looks exciting as well. So, but thank you all very much.
Thanks, Todd. Jesse, would you like to share anything about your testing practices and what you saw? Don't forget to unmute.
Yes.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So one thing that I recently learned that I really want to try that I haven't done, but I've seen some colleagues do, is they have a kind of free form question at the end of their exam that's worth maybe 5%. And it is having the student talk about what they learned that they thought was relevant to them and important to them, and giving them a chance to answer a question that you didn't even ask, basically. What was interesting to them that they learned. And so I'm going to be trying that on my first exam this semester, but I've heard that there are a lot of good results in that, and sometimes you get surprised by finding out what your students learned as they were getting particularly into one topic and going down a YouTube rabbit hole or something like that. So that's something that I definitely want to try. Smaller, more frequent assessments as well. I know Sherry probably has a lot to say about that. She's been doing a lot of that. Personally, I also do regrades of most early assessments, at the very least, like the first couple of lab reports. That's a big change to the way I've been doing assessments. I think this shift away from a final assessment that cannot be changed except for the final, then the class is over. But for the other assessments, there should be a chance to redeem yourself and show that you learned what you were supposed to learn. So I approach my assessments in that way as well. And so that's been the main change. One thing I wanted to do is, as scientists, we get to make use of the lab. And so in I've actually had a couple of small sections that I spread over a couple of labs last semester for the lab final. One where I just came by with I had a burette filled and said, how much is in there? Actually being next to them and checking and talking to them and using that as an assessment. Has been really valuable for me in the last couple of semesters as I've switched to try to understand each student even better than before.
Thanks, Jesse. I think let's hand it off to Sherry, because you're right. She's been doing a lot with her exams.
So one of the things that I've done for probably a couple of years now is I've changed the emphasis on exams versus quizzes. So traditionally, I think in science classes, there are some quizzes that are worth some points, and then the exams are the real heavy hitters, right? That's where most of the points are. So if a student doesn't do well on exams, then they typically don't pass a course. And so I've shifted that. And so I have my quizzes now worth almost equal points to exams. And my quizzes are all online. They're in Canvas. And I allow multiple attempts. They stay open until the end of the semester. So students can go in and take them as often as they want, as many times as they want, to learn the content. And I make it really clear to them that these should be viewed as learning tools instead of assessments after the fact. And for a lot of those students, that's a change in their mindset, because we think of a quiz or a test or an exam, and it's always after you've learned. And so I'm constantly trying to remind them, nope, you've read some of the content, go in there and try them and see what happens, because it's low stakes in the sense that if they mess it up, they can go back and redo it. And the other thing is so one criticism that I've gotten about this is, what about cheating? And, you know, if they have unlimited attempts, if they can use their notes, if they have all this, what seems to be free, you know, reign, then how do I know they're learning? Well, when I write the quizzes, I don't write them as, you know, calculate, blah, blah, and then there's one blank and they type in the answer. These are multi-layered questions that can have anywhere between like 5 or 10 blanks within a given question. And so my questions focus on the problem solving setup and the different aspects of the problem that they need to know before they get to the answer. So the truth is, if they go on the Google and they look up an answer and they happen to find an answer out there or a calculator that will give them the answer, they type that in or they enter that in, they might get 20%, 30% of the points. They didn't know how to set it up. They're just not going to get those points. And again, that is the purpose of the quiz. Is I really don't care, honestly. I know we're being recorded. I don't care if they get the final answer. I care that they understand the critical thinking and the thought process. And so that is the emphasis with those quizzes. I do want to say that it does take a long time to set these up. There's a lot of front end work. But the good news is that Canvas will grade them automatically. And so I'm not spending the time grading, but it is it's a bit of a learning curve to figure out how to design these. So that way I am assessing what I really want to assess in terms of their problem solving skills.
Thank you. We have about 15 minutes left. So what I think I'll do is give you all kind of a last words. And then if we still have a few minutes, we can ask if there's any questions. So feel free, like I didn't get to Matt, I didn't get to Tatiana. If you want to loop in that testing question in there, that's absolutely fine. But give you each a couple of minutes to kind of give us your final thoughts. Matt, how about we start with you?
Yeah, no, so just first off, thanks everybody for attending. This has been great. As Dr. Heibel has been saying, I've learned a lot from all of you, and I continue to learn from my colleagues, and it's just great, all the chats that's been going on. Alpa, thank you so much. Your words are inspiring, and it's great to have some of that background information. Just one last thing I'll say is I've done some of those, the questions like Jesse was talking about. I've started implementing that in my my midterm and final exams, and it's been great to see what the students pull out of the class when they're given free reign to answer in any way they like as to like what was the most important thing that you pulled out of this class. And you really do learn a lot about your students and yourself and the way that you're teaching and kind of what hit home for, you know, a variety of students. Sometimes it's kind of one thing that's a trend among the students they hit on, and that's great because, you know, you hit that one topic great. But if that's the only thing, then you know you got to do a little bit more for those other things. So it's a learning tool in both ways, and so that's why I really like that. So thank you, Jesse, for talking about that. Other than that, thank you all. It's been great.
Thanks. Let's see. I have Todd next on my screen. Would you like to share a few final thoughts?
Yes, no, thank you. I'll just echo what Matt and really all my colleagues have said. Really, thanks so much again to all of our participants today. The great chat conversation, the great panel conversation, and again, really a shout out to Bethany for organizing this event. It's great. And really quickly, if you don't see some of us at some of the subsequent meetings today, it's not because we're ignoring you. We actually have a science division, DEIAA conversation following this on the heels of this. And this has been great because if it's okay with you all, I'm going to bring some of these ideas into our conversation with our on-campus colleagues. But again, I think just keeping that open mind, being vulnerable, realizing that there's not a one-size-fits-all strategy, and just really allowing ourselves to elevate our students and just being, it's okay, be impressed with your students. And I know you all are. I know this is an amazing dynamic group. So again, thanks so much. I've learned a lot.
Thanks, Todd. How about you, Sherry? Some final thoughts?
I think that the best part out of all of this, being made aware that we should be looking at DEIA strategies and efforts and all of that, is how much I find I'm learning myself, but just the I guess the expanded creativity that it allows us as we're going into our classrooms and as we're deciding how to teach the content. It is very freeing to feel like, oh, I don't have to approach my classes in the same way that I was taught, which was all the same, right? We can explore some of these things that are outside the box. I've heard a couple of neat ideas today that I think I'll try. And maybe this quantitative nature, I love quantitative things, but the quantitative nature of grading an exam and everything being based on numbers, maybe it doesn't have to be that way all the time. Like Matt was saying, just having a conversation with a student and they know it because they can explain it to you, that should really matter. And so I just appreciate what we're able to come across in terms of creativity to try to reach the students, to reach them individually, to reach them collectively in the year 2023, not the year 1963, right? We should be taking advantage of technology, of cultural shifts and all of that. And so it makes it a really exciting time, I think, to be an instructor.
Thanks, Sherry. How about you, Jesse?
So I want to close with just kind of a side remark here is that, Sherry and others talked about ways in which we're using our mastery of technology now following COVID to be more creative with our assessments and the way we interact with students, allowing for more time in the classroom to interact with students. I think that is actually going to become even more pressing over the next year. Many of you may have heard of an AI software called ChatGPT that has come out a couple of months ago that is kind of taking academia by storm. If you have not, you should check it out. I know there was a panel today on it as well, but these are only going to become more advanced. And so our efforts in DEIA are actually going to segue into us being forced to be more creative with the way we approach our classes. And so this work is all coming together and reminding us that what we do as in the classroom is we should really be trying to understand our students, and DEIA is central to that. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. And last but not least, Tatiana, would you like to share some final thoughts?
Yes, I think that obviously I want to tell everybody, I'm very grateful that my ideas don't happen to be in a vacuum. I'm always chit-chatting with my colleagues from other disciplines, not just my department, and that has helped me greatly. And we have a really good rapport with each other, and I think that has been built on since we started working on the work and really looking at our students differently. So I want to say that has been, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. And then the other part is it has to do with making soft skills more visible. That, within STEM, we are very content oriented. And I feel that we need to also embrace and make visible the soft skills that we're also asking our students to have, but we don't make those visible. And so even scoring on those, right? Like, it doesn't have to be all like, it could be easy scores, but that the students can see that that's what we're actually aiming for too. And so, that's part of our rubrics when we're designing rubrics. And sometimes it might sound to us that it's subjective, but we can definitely be, like having examples. So soft skills are so important. They're transferable. Many of our students are not going to be specifically, in that one path that we, right? Like I think about my own journey. It's not just a single journey, and I think that makes a more human, oriented way of learning. And so I just wanted to leave that with that.
Beautiful. So I, just some final thoughts from me as well. I think that the science division has taught me a lot about the value of having a community. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not even part of their division. I invite myself to a lot of stuff that they do. But I think it's having that community that you can talk to about, yeah, thanks, Todd, I love you too. But it's having people that you can go to and go, oh my gosh, this assignment, I thought I was a genius. I screwed up. I need to do this differently. Or I'm having, I'm struggling with this area in my classes. Students aren't learning what I think they're learning, or I'm not conveying this very well. How do you do it? And having other people that will listen to you and give you feedback has gone a really long ways, at least for me personally. And I see that happening a lot in their division. So if I can encourage you to do anything as you, leave this session, is find those co-conspirators on campus that you can, ask when you get stuck. You can, bounce ideas off of each other, because we do want to also recognize campuses are very different. Campus cultures are very different. Student bodies and demographics are going to be different. There's 116 community colleges, right? Plus, I know there's many other non-community college institutions that are here. So, look for that community, find those people who are going to benefit you and make you better at what you do. Even when you all don't have the answer, I think that goes a really, really long way. Yeah, and keep you sane, right? That goes a really long way. And I think that there's a lot of value in just talking, again, reaching to people maybe outside of STEM, right? Maybe different, whether it's full-time, part-time, but bringing in just different voices. I have lots of respect for what the science division is doing, and very intentionally, like later today, holding Zoom meetings where they can just be very open and talk about this. But not all of our divisions or departments operate that way. So you might need to be one of those people who starts that. Pull a few people together, ask a couple of good questions, and make it a regular occurrence within your institution. We have a few minutes left. I want to, are there any other questions that anyone would like to ask, or any other practices that you would like to share? I know that we've had a very active chat. Is there anyone who would like to share some of what they're doing or some other ideas? Feel free to raise your hand and we can call on you.
Penny, I think Alpa had a question regarding the STEM faculty inclusion of adjunct or part-time faculty.
Yeah, please. Do any of our presenters want to share an answer to that? Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say we definitely try to include our adjunct faculty in, I think, throughout STEM. I know for sure in the geosciences, we have great participation at our meetings. And it's always difficult because of timing. Adjunct faculty are spread very thin with all the different institutions they're at. But their voices are so important because they see so many students, and so many students at different institutions. They can pull in perspectives that are very, very helpful. And so finding a way to do that is often difficult, as my colleague Todd said in the chat. But we do reach out and try to schedule our meetings at various times to catch those adjuncts that are able to make it. But definitely an important thing to include.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to share? Or even Alpa, if you have ideas, please.
Well, I mean, I think that since the bulk of the teaching, I mean, whether at, community or senior colleges, is part-time adjunct faculty, right? So I think they are the ones who need to be heard the most. They're the frontline soldiers, as it were, right? And I think there's a lot of innovation occurring within what adjuncts do. I'm an adjunct, right? And I've created this whole thing that I'm working on. And so, but, full-time faculty actually doesn't really want to hear about it. And then oftentimes are just annoyed with that.
I hear it. No,
I don't know, we can talk all this, but if it's not going to translate to overall changes within, school-wise or your institution-wise, then it's really cool what you're doing in your individual courses. That's great, but I don't know. And we are talking about inclusivity, right? And equity and access. Are we really? I don't know.
Right. And I don't think any institution does that perfectly, even the ones who really think they do, right? I don't know that I have perfect answers to how to be more inclusive of adjuncts, but I think that we who are in the room can try that, right? And I know, Tatiana, you unmuted. Do you have yeah,
I know that, like that has been a a conversation in our department a lot, and obviously, timing it's difficult, but we're also have we're planning. So we did change our course outline of record for Bio 100, which is our non-majors course. We changed it tremendously, and so we're hoping that this semester we can actually have various conversations with part-time faculty of how we have tried it, because it's kind of also, right, like we don't want to put it on people and say, here's the change and, go do it on your own. But instead we're hosting, so we're creating a Google Classroom where we could deposit shared ideas, rituals, spaces, things that are not just necessarily just assignments, but also kind of like, what we're trying, and, even our failed experiments, right? Like the things that, oh, this is what I tried and it didn't really work, and why. And so we're even trying to communicate that in a sort of like digital space, so that somebody can come in and say, oh yeah, let me look at this stuff. And so that's kind of part of our onboarding of part-time faculty. And as chair of my department, I am really like aiming for that everybody sees that, whether you're teaching Bio 100 or not, because we're all learn from, right, like the open spaces. And I think that we are aware that teaching is an isolated space. And that's why we're so productive, I think, in the division right now, because we have that rapport that we can just talk to each other. So it definitely takes a lot of effort from the department chair as well. And I know, Jesse, you bring out your faculty as well. You're, like in chemistry, you guys do that. So we all kind of really have a goal to bring people in, not perfectly, but we're aiming for that.
And I think it speaks to the responsibility of those who are full-timers to do what you can to support your part-timers, and not from that deficit mindset, right? Of, oh, they need my help to do this job, because we clearly saw in the chat, Alpa's doing a lot of really good work, right? So it's not from that deficit mindset, but from that supportive lens of, we want you to feel like you're part of this institution. And again, I know we can't force every department to do that. I know that's not a perfect thing in any way, but, for my full-timers who are in the room, recognizing and hearing straight from the mouth of someone in that role, right? This is a call. This is something that we need to take some action and support of our part-timers for. So yeah, it's more than welcome to be a noisy one, Alpha. That's okay.